Hello and welcome to Live Talk at the South Gloucester Business Show. My name is Peter Quintana. I'm a director and co-owner of HGKC. We're a management consultancy working with owner-managed businesses. We deliver practical and expert advice on leadership, innovation, exit planning and succession. I'm delighted to welcome Roger Proctor, MBE, founder and former chairman of Proctor & Stevenson, the award-winning Bristol-based marketing, design and communications agency. As an advocate of design as a catalyst for positive change economically, culturally and socially, particularly in the southwest of England, Roger received an honorary degree from the University of West of England in 2008 and an MBE in 2012. He was also chairman of the West of England Design Forum from 2005 to 2007 and of the Southwest of England Design Forum from 2007 to 2011 and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. HGKC worked with him from 2021 until his exit in 2023 when he completed the sale of his business to his management team. Our role was to help him prepare himself and his team, working alongside his corporate finance and legal team and introducing financial and legal advisors to represent the management team. So welcome, Roger, and thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
I wanted to start by asking you for a quick history of Proctor & Stevenson. When you first founded the business, your original ideas about where you wanted to go, how you came to be the business focused on doing good for the people, planet and community that we found when we started working with you.
Right, well, I set up the business in 1979 in the last term, the last year of college. I was at the University of West of England, it's Bristol Polytechnic then, down at the Faculty of Art and Design, and I trained as a graphic designer. And like all young graphic designers, I wanted to be the best designer in the world. And so I started out, I had a partner for the first year, and then I was on my own for probably another 3 to 4 years. And it was basically around corporate communications, brand, etc. And of course this was the years before desktop computing, so it was all drawing boards. And I gradually grew the business through the 1980s, and it was around about 9-10 people. But I realised very early on that I could either try and be the best graphic designer in the world and people would beat a path to my door, or I actually had to scale the business. Because at the end of the day, although I was still in my 20s, I knew that when I was retiring I needed something to sell. And so during the 1990s, got heavily into direct marketing, obviously the development of electronic media. We then got into product development, software development, data, and we used to say that the business was absolutely different every 3 years. It was almost like this sort of cycle we seemed to go through. And we became, when I left, when I sold the company, I think we had been the longest serving design and communications company in the Southwest, and probably one of 5 in the whole of the UK. And that was because we always embraced change. We were always looking around the corner. We sort of welcomed change. It's tiring, but we will always try to be ahead of the game. And I think that as I was building the company and as people joined the company, one thing about creative people is that they always think that they're right. They always think that they can do it better. But they also want to feel that they are part of something that is more than just the day-to-day activity. And also, for me, I wanted to build a business that had a reputation, had recognition, but also contributed to, as I used to call it, a sort of a community enterprise. So a community of people that, yes, were there to do the work, and go and get the work and deliver it successfully, but actually to be part of more, so part of its local community, part of its regional community, part of its national community, and to do good for, yes, of course, ourselves, but also for our communities, for the planet. So we got involved in all sorts of things. In the last 3 years, we became a B Corp. We helped set up the West of England Design Forum, or at one point led the Design Southwest, which was under the umbrella of the Southwest Regional Development Agency. We creative policy in the Southwest. All sorts of things.
And you ran your own design awards as well, didn't
you?
I remember
we did,
being at the ceremony one year.
Yeah, we actually set the Southwest Design Awards for students back in the late 1980s, and we still run that after all these years, and that's produced some fantastic results, jobs for people. People have gone on to, for instance, the current head of brand for Dyson is an ex-winner, people who are working all over the world, and that's been a really positive thing as well, and it's been a great inspiration actually to us to see all this new talent come through.
Yeah. So we first met just before the pandemic. I remember sitting with you in January of 2020 talking about what you wanted to do and how we might be able to help you. But it was obviously some time before you commissioned us. Part of that was the challenges of figuring out how you were going to continue to thrive through that extraordinary period. But I know you were considering other options as well, and I was just wondered why it was you decided we were the right people to work with.
It's very difficult when you're a business owner and a founder. I mean, I trained as a graphic designer, so no one had taught me how to run a business. I'd never been to a business school. I'd never actually, I was just a designer. I just happened to end up with 85 people, it seemed like. And people often sort of say to me, what was the plan? And I used to say to them, there's no plan, it's just survival. To an extent, you are driven by fear, I have to say. And I think everyone looks a bit disappointedly at you because they sort of think, well, you must have had a plan. How? But I suppose actually there was a plan. It was pretty broad, and it got honed and honed as time went on. But I got to that time when, I wasn't getting any younger, and I felt that technology was moving in such a way that although I had a pretty good handle on it, there would come a time when perhaps I was more challenged. So I felt that I needed to talk to someone. I was part of different sort of managing directors groups and so forth at different times, which were useful, but they were more general conversations than the ones that I needed to have. Because at the end of the day, I'm an individual, I have family circumstances, I have business circumstances that need to be sort of drilled into, as it were, to actually come up with a plan, a process and a plan that was tailored to my needs. And Peter, we met, we talked, I thought about it. As usual, work got in the way, family life gets in the way, I prevaricated, but we met up just before the pandemic. You created a rough outline for me, sort of in front of me, of all the things that we should be concerned with and talking about and planning for. And that was really useful. And then, of course, the pandemic happened when that all went west because we were just working out how we actually survived, how we got through this. Because after all, none of us had ever dealt with something like this. So, and then when we got through the pandemic, it was a question of reactivating, really, and getting on with it. And I think the thing that I felt you were going to be that voice of conscience sitting on my shoulder going, have you done this, have you done that, you should be thinking about this.
I seem to remember some conversations like that.
Yeah, and to be honest, sometimes it was a bit of a pain in the backside, because you can hide in the day-to-day. That's the thing, you can justify that that's more important to yourself, justify it to yourself, but in fact actually you are kidding yourself. You need, of course the day-to-day is important, but it should be balanced by planning the future.
Well, that's one of the things we try to do quite early on when we work with clients who are thinking about exit is understand how much you're getting lost in the day-to-day of the business first. Because if you're going to exit, you need to leave behind a management team that is capable of running the business without you in it, and they're not going to be capable of doing that if you're still in it. And we find that challenge a lot, and certainly with you. But you've been running the business for 40 years, Roger. It's difficult to get out, isn't it?
Well, yeah. It was my baby. I had gone through many different challenges, and you are consumed by it because you're fearful of it as well to an extent. I mean, as a business owner, unless you're completely without feeling, you have dozens and dozens of people starting to have young families, they have mortgages, they've got their own dreams, their own desires. If I truly believe that it's a sort of community enterprise, I have to be interested in them. I have to be interested in their futures, take that responsibility seriously. And so there is a big element of fear of failure.
Yeah.
But I think also, as you invest so much in it, you invest, and it's not only you, it's your family as well. It's very difficult to start to let go, and it's very difficult to forget that you are creating something that has and needs to take those responsibilities incredibly seriously. I know there are businesses out there that seemingly don't, but certainly I've very seldom met someone who runs a business who actually doesn't care very deeply about the people who work there.
Yeah, it's really important to us with the clients that we work with. We don't want to work with a client that doesn't care about the people that work for them, because you're dependent on them to a very large extent for the success of the business, aren't you? Just following on that line, there are lots of different ways to sell a business. What made you decide to exit through MBOs or management buyouts, or in other words, to sell to your management team? Why did you like that idea?
Well, first of all, I think you have to work out what it is you're actually selling. Now, I felt that there were several options for me. I could on for a trade sale. I suppose my difficulty with that was that although I would probably get more money, I had to actually package the business up in such a way that it would make it easier. But in fact, all the stories I heard about trade sales, to be honest with you, filled me with dread. The other thing was that, of course, I've never worked for anybody else. And the one thing that I knew is that any trade sale, final value that I got would be dependent on me staying there for a number of years on an earn-out and meeting performance targets.
Yeah, it's often the way. It's not always the way, but it's often the way, and to a certain extent depends on how the buyer sees the future of the business and where the relationships are. And I think one of the things that we understood quite quickly from you was that a lot of your primary client relationships had already been moved to people in your team. So it might have been less than several years for you, but certainly earn-out is the usual route when you go out by trade to any external buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an EOT, Employee Ownership Trust.
Yeah.
And that was quite attractive actually, because it was all of the employees in fact would own the business. My prime motivator really was, as I've said to guys, was to actually give opportunity to senior management team, many of whom have been with me for over 20 years, to get the chance that I had to own their own business, run their own business. And so I basically selected a team, and there were, I think, 7 people originally who were invited. I would talk to them individually in confidence to see if they were interested in a management buyout. I gave them a choice. I said they could lead an EOT or they could do a management buyout. And to a person, they came back and said they wanted to do a management buyout. So I think it was about explaining to them the process, and the process that I'd discussed with you, Peter, and also Kim. That these people were going to go on a journey. They were going to go on a sort of an assessment journey, a training journey, and not all of them were going to make it to the end of that journey. And so it wasn't a given just because I'd asked them if they were interested in going on this journey. It wasn't a given they were going to get to the end of it. Now, obviously, that was an important conversation. It was a very confidential conversation, but it was really important to have as we embarked on that journey, which really took us probably, 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, quite a lot of the work was assessing the readiness of that team and helping them to understand how they could then lead that MBO, because part of it was presenting the future vision and business case of the firm so that they could raise the funding for it. So they have to have the confidence to be able to do that. I was going to ask you, we introduced, whilst we were going through this process, we introduced a couple of tools to you that I don't think you'd used before. One was disc behavioural preference profiling, and the other was the employee engagement survey. How did you find those tools?
Start with the employee employee survey. That was scary.
Often is the first time, isn't it? Especially when you see all the comments that come back and you think, oh, I've got to reply to all of these anonymously.
It was, I have to say, I was reluctant, but I found it incredibly useful. And bearing in mind that we had the highest score that any business new to the scheme had ever had, which was amazing. I mean, it was, I can't remember what it was, like 80% or something.
It was high, yeah. It was higher than the average that they said. But that was a reflection, I think, on the kind of business that you were running. So you must have been really pleased when you saw that.
Oh yeah, we're absolutely thrilled. I mean, it was a real sweat replying to everybody. And then we realised that we could do it more efficiently, and we divided the work up amongst the senior team to reply. But it was really gratifying that, you tend to focus on the problems and forget about all the positives. And the positives way outweighed the problems. And you felt, you came away with a feeling that actually all the hard graft, all the care and attention was actually paying off, and that was great. So it became sort of embedded into our systems.
And also, particularly the survey. I mean, talk to lots of business owners and think, well, how do your employees feel about working for you? And they say, oh, they're fine. Maybe there's a few problems here and there, but generally they're fine. But to actually, for people like us, for a third party to come in and find that out for real, means we've got to go talk to everybody. That will take ages, and assume that they're honest in their response. So we like the survey because A, it's anonymous, and B, it allows us to get almost like a litmus test of the business very, very quickly, and for you as the owner as well. So you get it warts and all. I've seen some that have been quite ugly, the first ones, and yours was far from that. But we always say it's better to know than not to know, because then you know what you're facing, don't you? And then you know how you can react to that.
Absolutely. You know what you're dealing with. And I think it was also a really good exercise for the prospective MBOers, as it were, because they could find out what their teams were thinking and the issues to address, etc. But going on to the DISC profiling, that again was a really useful exercise, because although you think you know their strengths and weaknesses, you probably don't. And it was very useful for me understanding who I was and the things that I was. You think you know what you're not interested in, what you are interested in, but you actually have something come along like that that's sort of scientific to tell you, actually, yes, you're right, or there are nuances to this, don't necessarily understand. I think it is really very useful. And I think it also helps in the conversations you have with people and the way that you deal with people. Having these profiles will also help you. We talked about this journey that people were on the MBO track, and that they wouldn't all necessarily get to the end of that road. And actually, this profiling helped in that as well. But also, at that time, Peter, I don't know if you may not have been quite so aware of it, or maybe I don't know how much we talked about it. I'd already started backing away from quite a lot of things, and I think that's one of the real challenges. And I know we did talk about it quite a lot actually, but because that was one of the things that you said to me, that you got to be more hands off, and that's a really difficult thing when it has been your baby, and only you think you can do it the right way, the best way, and actually backing off and allowing people to make their own mistakes, and then trying to help them through that, but also have your nose slightly put out of joint, and actually they make a far better fist of it than you think you would have done.
They always say that you should employ people who are better than you, don't they?
That's right.
Because that lifts you too. But it is hard. I just wanted to pick up on a point that you made before. We use DISC profiling with teams to help them communicate with each other and work better together. And that comes about because the profile begins by helping to raise your self-awareness. So you say you think you know yourself, and I think I know myself reasonably well, but there are nuances and behavioural types and behavioural things that you might engage in just because that's what comes naturally to you. But if you have heightened self-awareness and then heightened awareness of others around you, you can begin to modify the way you choose to behave with those, and that's why you get better results. Because we're in slightly different places on the profile, but if I understand where your preferences are, I can move towards you, work better with you, and vice versa. And that's how it worked with the team. And those guys that didn't make it were the ones that didn't see that opportunity, I think. It's not the only reason, but they just didn't see where the opportunity was in learning more about themselves and learning more about the people that they were working with.
I think there's that, but also I think that people, when you run a business, I mean, it's over the years, I used to deal with things very emotionally. I was emotionally driven, rather than sometimes sitting back and really reflecting and thinking about it. And there's certainly, sleeping on a problem is far better than reacting immediately. And I think your involvement certainly helped me develop that ability and give me the confidence, actually, to sit back and reflect and to be more considered about what I was doing and the approach that I was taking and the approach I was encouraging other people. And the work that we did with you really fell into sort of two camps, really. The first camp, if you like, was developing the team, etc. But the second camp was actually personal to me.
Yeah.
Is how are you, Roger, going to cope with this? How are you going to move forward? What does exit look like? What's post-exit look like? And that was really important, because it was, to an extent, it's counselling with pressure. It's counselling, but saying, look, you've got to make these kinds of decisions. And actually, should we put a timetable on this? And then reviewing that timetable and saying, well, have we hit this? Have we hit that? Are we ahead? Are we behind? Etc.
Yeah, because you had a target for when you wanted to be out, which we said to you was probably a bit close, and proved to be the case. But it is about, it's all very well having a plan, but if you're not then reviewing that on a regular basis. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the sea in your yachts. You know that going from A to B is never in a straight line. You're going to tack one way or the other. You're going to find the best currents or the best winds or whatever it is, and that's how a business journey unfolds as well. So the map that I drew for you that day when we first met, it's called an outcomes map. The ultimate outcome was you exiting the business, and the question that I asked you is, what's got to be true for you to be confident to do that?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes a very, very difficult question, and often there are multiple answers to it, because it's not just about the readiness of the people, it's not just about the money that you might get, it's about all sorts of other things, and particularly I think for you, because the legacy of the business was really important to you. The reputation of the business with the clients that you work with was really important to you. Community was really important to you. So there were lots of things that needed to be true for you to be confident to walk away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just to say, I don't sell so much now. I've got a motorboat, because you can go from A to B. Yeah. But I think actually, it's sort of a little story, an aside, if you like. When the build-up to the MBO was really good. It wasn't without its issues at different times, because people have different expectations. They obviously lost a couple of people on the road, so that there were those sort of bumps in the road, those challenges. But it got to the point where I was going to announce to the company several things: changes in the management structure, and obviously, of course, the fact that I was going to exit the business. And when these company announcements were made, in 485 people, there's me announcing them, expecting everyone there'd be a sharp intake of breath and everyone to be terribly shocked. And because we'd actually done, I think, tonally, we had done such a good job across the business, they were going sort of, and so there's me wanting some kind of dramatic response, and it was just like, oh, okay. So actually, it just showed that we'd done the job well.
I think also, again, our experience working with other clients, owners will often underestimate what their employees have already figured out for themselves. Yeah. The challenge is if you don't tell them, you create a level of uncertainty, and in uncertainty, employees will tend to make up what might be happening next. So although the response wasn't major surprise or major shock, I mean, people could look at you and think, well, he's been running this company for a while, maybe he's going to be retiring at some point.
I think they want me to go.
Yeah, maybe they did as well, but I'm not sure how true that was. But employees figure things out for themselves. So coming out and telling them might have been just saying, okay, yes, what I thought was going on was right. But actually it shows a level of trust that you have in them, that you're now telling them that. And that gets reciprocated in the way they then respond to that. We encourage you to do it, and we thought it was the right thing for you to do, and it proved to be the case. The fact that they weren't shocked by that, I think is, as you say, a measure of how well the business had been prepared, albeit not necessarily knowing what they were being prepared for, but how well the business had been prepared by you and by the team that you were working with.
Yeah. I think just one of the other things to talk about with regards to the team, and when we talk about this journey that the team went on, and we lost a couple of people along the way, it's with the best will in the world, though you might want people to want the same things as you, they won't always. Of course, they're all individuals and different and so forth. And so you have to force the process, but you can't necessarily force the final outcome. It has to be a choice for people, and they have to really want it. And what was great, the team that finally ended up doing it really wanted to. They were so energised and wanted to actually straight away change things after I left. I was sitting there from outside looking in and saying, oh, why have they changed that? You know, but in fact actually it's all about they could see things that I couldn't see, but also about making it their own. And I think that was really important and entirely beneficial. But yeah, it's about helping them to grow into it rather than absolutely forcing it. Very often that's getting them to question.
Absolutely, to encourage them to be curious about the business, about the future of the business, and then to navigate their own route, because they might choose to take a different tack or a different route across to where they want to go, and it may be that where they want to go might be slightly different.
Yeah.
The MBO was concluded July last year. Now that you've had a bit of time to reflect, have things turned out for you and in the business the way that you expected they would?
The business has changed dramatically since I was. There's a lot more work going on in the USA than there was. Different markets have developed. And the personal involvement, obviously, on a day-to-day basis is diminished hugely. But I thought that I would be able to just walk away and not think about it, not worry about it. And I found, just on a personal note, I found that much more difficult to do than I thought. It's much better now, but I think part of it is because I'm the landlord, so I have an involvement there. But obviously, most of it is because actually all the people involved in the MBO I've known for years, and they're my friends, and I care. This is a legacy business. And that was an important thing, it's a legacy. And it might have been a business transaction, but it was a deal between friends.
And the whole approach you took was underpinned by legacy right from the beginning. I mean, from that very first day when we sat down together, that was what I understood. It wasn't about the money, it wasn't just about the money, and that's refreshing. I mean, I remember being in the room with your corporate finance team when they said normally we're in here persuading owners that their expectations are way too high. And I think I sat there listening to you replying to that, and I was really impressed that even though they were saying to you market value is more than you're asking from your MBO team, you said it's not the most important thing. And they genuinely, I don't think I'd ever heard anybody say that before. So I think that's a reflection on you and what you wanted for the business. I thought that was really important. I was really impressed when I heard you do that.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. I mean, I suppose where I was coming from is, we talk about this idea of a legacy business. It had my name over the door. We as a community enterprise it was so much more than just the work. It was our local community, it was our design community in the Southwest, UK, BLC. It had to be aspirational on both a professional but also an emotional level, if you see what I mean. So I came from the point of view of what do I need out of this? What do I need to get me to carry on and protect my family and all those kinds of things? So I based it on that. It was getting the business to a point where it could deliver safely to me what I needed to shuffle off, as it were. And yes, that was a surprise. It seemed to be a surprise to the corporate finance team, but I just couldn't really do it any other way. That wasn't within my DNA. I come from a very strong design heritage. My father was a very famous book designer, and he and my mother worked together for years, and they had a very strong philosophy, and that was passed down to me. So it's what made me comfortable. It was in, as I say, in my DNA.
Yeah. So I've got one last question for you then, and that's drawing on your experience, 40 years running the business, and then the experience working with us as you went through. What advice would you give to somebody who is starting out on that journey, and what would you like to have known yourself at the start of your own?
Well, I'm going to have to look at a few notes here.
That's okay.
You asked me that question the other day, and I sort of came up with various answers. I think one of the key things, I'm just talking about finance actually, which is really important. One of the things we had was when we went to the bank, the manager that knew the business well was really good, really very, very good, and was incredibly helpful. But what the bank decided, and none of us realised this, and I don't know whether it's the same with all banks, but you need to check this out, is that they then said, well, okay, there's going to be a conflict of interest here, so therefore you need a relationship manager, and the MBO team need a relationship manager. Now, what we didn't do, and what we should have done, is then actually made sure that we spent a lot of time briefing the new relationship manager, which we didn't because we thought the bank would do that. In fact, they didn't, and that caused us problems, slowed things up considerably. And it's making sure that everybody's completely briefed up with all the detail they need right at the beginning, and that was an issue. I think the other thing about a business is there are all sorts of things that happen in the history of a business, and there are things that you deal with, you have to deal with. Also, there are other things that you think, oh, well, that'll wait for another day. The sort of skeletons in the cupboard. And it's really important to sort those when you start the process, because it only takes something very small to derail you or to hold things up.
And that applies actually whatever mechanism you take, whether it's selling to an external or an internal. And in some respects, it's even more important when you're selling to an internal team, because you don't want them finding out things that they didn't know afterwards. So sorting them out and then making sure the communication is right. It's really important.
No, absolutely. And I think the final thing I would say is I was actually clear with myself. But whoever listens to this, you've got to be absolutely clear with yourself what it is that you want out of it and what you're hoping to leave. If it's just about the money, okay, it's just about the money. If it's about something different, or the money and something different, as I say, in my case it was about legacy, and it was about longevity, and I think that's the really important thing, is longevity for me, then you've got to really sit there and work out how you do that, or how you're going to do it in the most effective way, and actually what you say to people. Because at the end of the day, you've got to, if you go for an MBO, for instance, you've got to talk to those people, you've got to address their fears and concerns, but you've also got to give them a vision of what it could be. And that also means knowing the things that you've done right, but also the things that you've done wrong, and acknowledging those things that you've done wrong, because actually as you go through the process you may need to adjust some of those things. So it's going into it honestly, with an open book, the ability to talk frankly, but also to leave people with a sense of possibility. When you own a business, you're actually, on the whole, you're an eternal optimist. Now, being an eternal is a really important attribute. But also, the trouble with eternal optimists is that they can sometimes kid themselves. And I've done a lot of that in my time. I wish I hadn't done quite so much. But also, I'm grateful I've been an eternal optimist. But you have to everybody has to go into it realism about what it is that they're trying to do and trying to achieve, but with a healthy dose of optimism as well.
Good answer. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here today, Roger. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed working with you as well. And I hope you thoroughly enjoy the rest of your retirement.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Long may that last.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.